Hey people, it's time for the Ultimatum, the second to last track from my album The Poison Egg 1. This one is really quite crazy. And the funny thing is, this started off as a brief for a trailer track that I noticed pretty early on was just not gonna fit the brief. I kind of de-escalated in my ideas. And then in a case like that, I still want to finish those ideas. So I just don't let the trailer brief determine that I shouldn't do this. I just decided to do this, and I did the trailer like I did another track for the trailer a few days after, which still worked. But for this one, I just went crazy and I just embraced those crazy ideas because I think it turned out super cool. Let's just showcase. Here we are in the DAW. I'm just gonna go from the start to the end. It's a pretty wild track. My computer doesn't like this track as much, which I don't really mind. It's just a lot of synth stuff with lots of processing. Let's just start. I think we should start at the end track sound, but I'm first just gonna play everything. Let's turn it up a little bit. Lots of stuff happening. Really lot. There's this background sound that's Anthrax, which is a custom sound that I did. I think I showcased this in another one as well. This is an SFX sound that I made from my own breath. I processed it quite significantly. I threw on a reverb filter, which adds really cool effects. And then, but it also has a gain. But you can hear the reverb if you like switch the volumes. Anyways, that's the Anthrax sounds, which is a really nice sound for this super dramatic thing. And this is also layered with this hurdy-gurdy sound, which is a bit more subtle, but just to turn it up. Okay, let's just... Crazy hurdy-gurdy sound. And together it sounds pretty cool. And then you have the strings. These are just low strings, just bassy strings. These are more textural, but I'll mean 5. And they are the air and ice one. And then the Pacific basses. I particularly used quite a bit of Pacific over the entire album, just for some consistency. And because it has a bit of a rough edge, which I kind of like for this kind of sounds. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter that much, but yeah, it's what I chose, so I just stuck with it. I do really like this one in particular, the solo cello, which sounds pretty good for VST cello. And then you have these. This sound is probably recognizable because it's in a lot of places in my album. And yeah, it really adds that cohesion. This is also where I determined that it's gonna be a track for my album, and I'm glad. I also switched the tempo here to 7/8 because the idea that I had for the ARP was quite hectic. You can hear that instead of, if it's in 4/4, it's not as hectic and it has more time to kind of develop. And here it's cut off, like these last 3 notes. Here it kind of cuts off and goes back into the next phrase. And this ARP is the Abrin ARP, which is an ARP that I also made for my the Poison sounds. It's not a commercial product, by the way. It's just something I made for the album. It's this ARP that is lots of customization, and I really like that for playing around with it. If you want to recreate it, this is kind of how you can do that. And everything is moving a little bit. And it's really moving around. But that's because I put on this plugin, which I love so much, that's not supported by Cubase 15 anymore, and that makes me very mad. I want to have a substitute for this plugin, but it's basically meant for Dolby Atmos, pretty sure. I just use it for kind of weird panning. You hear how cool that is? Wow. Automating that and just doing magical stuff with it. But you can hear it better if I do this. And yeah, it's pretty fun. There's also, you might have noticed like the weird quirky sound, but I kept that in because it's cool. And there's more Anthrax layers here as well. And yeah, there's a boom, just simple stuff. But then here I add another layer of ARP, which you can definitely hear. And bam. And this is more of like a key sound. Also one that I made myself for the Poison pack. It's really weird. It's very out of tune and imperfect and like kind of classy. And it works really well here. Especially together. It has this nice sparkle at the top end. So yeah, these kind of decisions can really help you create some interesting things. Just creating like layering it with purpose. That's the idea behind it. But usually it's just me experimenting and then finding out it's pretty cool. Which here it was. Really like this one. And I'm just saying that because on its own this one kind of sucks. In most cases. But yeah, then here we have more dark sounds and the ARP. But then the piano also comes in. Very open, very lush and spacious, but also dark. I don't think it's super lush actually. Yeah, just open, emotional. And then we have another piano with low notes. That's just gonna get down into the next beat. Bam! Here we go! And here where it's... This part is maybe my favorite part because the contrast of what's happening before and the change is just so extremely fun. So, there's so much stuff that's happening here. So, first of all, the Abrin thing, it's still there. But it has a filter that I'm automating to make it even weirder. So what's happening is I just basically go from like the normal sound and then with the filter I'm like closing it in. To make it feel like very low resolution there. Then there's this. This is just the horns patch, trailer horns, that I'm pitch shifting with crap ton of distortion on it. And this feels super dramatic. Originally I had this as a trailer signature sound for the brief, but I decided I'm just going to keep it for this. This would work well for a trailer track, but just all of this was a bit too crazy for the kind of brief that I had. And then there's lots of layers on top of the ARP now. Wait, before I show those, there's also the little whoosh that's going together with this reverse sound here. This is a reverse sound that I made just by reversing stuff. Super simple. Actually, I don't think I made this one. This is probably just a preset, actually. But I don't remember. But you hear all those clicky, clacky sounds that are happening. I added in all those. So you have these. And they sound so incredibly satisfying. I'm so hyped about it. So it's just... there's these, which are percussion from the Middle East. Yeah, so... I'm not sure I have two of them, but there's some... The naming schemes are a bit messed up. It's a bit messy, each project. Yeah, those are just percussion. I was thinking these are tuned percussion, but I don't have those here. So these are percussion to add like clickiness to the piano and the ARP. So if we enable the ARP, sorry for being so chaotic today. It's pretty cool. Now just to have just a piano. You might be wondering, how did I make that? Well, I just did the particles engine on mallet mode and that's it. So with the mallet mode you can kind of play it. And that's pretty cool. And then here I did a similar thing, but I did with the plucked, and the plucked ones are like this. So yeah. And then they're dancing around a little bit. And that's just the nature of the particles engine, by the way. So that really works to my benefit. So super dramatic. And then some more end tracks as a response. And then there's also, as a response, there's also these. I'm not going to go into too much detail how I made this because it's a bit complicated. But what I did was I just created this from the Olaf Arnold's cells and I held down a lot of keys that were adjacent to each other and I did some sort of crescendo and I processed that. That's the short version. And this is where the 7/8 rhythm really shines. You get the, with the low chords. Oh, not the really chords, just the low notes. You have the bass and you have the pianos. And they play this. Here's, it's mostly low notes, but there are chords on the Worcester one. And it's just, you hear that kind of rushed feeling. That's where it goes down. It's like, and that's where the 7/8 just really shines here. And you still have the arps going on. And here we have some spicy harmonies going on. Not super spicy, just a little. String melody is super simple, just waving and it's violins and octaves, well, cellos and violins. And then another break section. Structure-wise, I'm not even gonna try to explain what I did. I just, because I don't know myself either, just did what felt right to me at the moment. Most of this was made at probably 2 AM, 3 AM maybe later. So it's a bit of breathing room again. For the, well, breathing room, let's not take that term too seriously for this. And now we have the kicks that were mandatory to come in because this is the poison and we have kicks everywhere. So this part gets more interesting with the percussion, where we still have these clicky clacky percussions, but more of it. So there's delays, there's compactors and clippers on there to make them very EDM-like, very dynamically squeezed. But I didn't do it as much as EDM producers will do, probably. I don't know. But at least it sounds cool. There's kicks. Oh yeah, this is sidechaining a lot of stuff. We'll hear that in a bit. And this is also an interesting sound where you have the rolls. So this is basically a percussion roll, but I'm using a trance gate and as well as shaper box to kind of pan left and right. And the trance gate I'm using more as an LFO tool to kind of do that. And then it's also changing the pitch just to create a bit more movement. I try to give all the elements the attention they deserve to all of their own unique stories and experiences. And then we have this. I'm not even sure what it's doing. I'm not even sure if it's... This is probably something I forgot to remove. This is not really obvious. But it's in there. Well, whatever. This is where the kicks just start to shine. And again, that changes up the mood a bit. Now some violins that repeat kind of the melody at D. Actually, I think this might be a different melody. This is my main focus here, by the way. This part, there's a lot of strings, but the strings play more of a supporting role. And the bass is meant to be the main point of attention here. You can see I redid the bass a lot. I tried to find the perfect bass, and eventually I set up with this. Just a custom patch I made in DFAT, which sounds pretty thick, together with the kicks. And again, this is like similar to what I have in some of the other tracks throughout this album, like What We Wish For and Gravel, and with all the percussion. And then we have this sound going on, or the strings. And then we also have, of course, the arp. And the arp is also sidechained to the kick, which you can hear. And now I'm not using Shaperbox, I'm actually sidechaining them. Shaperbox is nicer, but I felt like actually sidechaining them was easier because this one is in 7/8, so that's with Shaperbox that works a bit annoying. Anyways, the next part, let's just do it like this. Shifting up the mood again. Having this pitch for drama, but then there's also this that's going on with the end tracks. And then there's also a bunch of atmospheres going on in this part in particular, and at the later part. But I looked through a lot of sounds, but this one in particular was very, very special. Because what it did is, it's called Distorted Defense. And it felt really cool. I was looking at some sort of texture sound and I wasn't really sure what exactly. This one just fit really well. And it's a big obvious part of this part. And then we have this, which is also Omnisphere thingy. It's called Desolate Plateau, but it's a pad sound. And I bent that down with a pitch shifter and added my own reverb. So yeah, that's this part. Another cool thing about this, I'm switching up the harmonies to do something very crazy. And my music theory is not good enough to tell you what I'm doing, but it's doing this. If you want to look at it, these are the chords. This track had to feel super dramatic and like confronting, because that's the Ultimatum. It's a title that I came up afterwards. It just fit really well. And the big part is the strings again, but also some brass. There's nothing new here, just reusing everything that was there before, except for the brass. Then, small again, repeating that really cool patch from Omnisphere. And ending that with a big boom. Getting ready for the last track in the album. That's the idea behind it. And yeah, just to get back at like the final part, which is kind of the biggest, it's just repeating elements that we've heard over this entire track, but then together, because you have this part with like the strings, and that's what it's most similar to, but it's still not exactly that, because now when you hear, you have the brass and it's moving in a cool direction. You have the ARP going on. Well, you have a lot of these things going on there as well. Without the brass, it would be a bit more boring. The strings also are not as special or dynamic here, just they're this. Just a bit of movement in there, but they're more like synth-like. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that, really. And I gave it a bit more space by not having these filling up the low mids and the mids. And the Albion 1 string ensemble is still one of my all-time favorite ensembles. It just sounds so smooth. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff to say about it that I cannot say due to my lack of explaining theory. And I just think it's really fun to play around with the harmonies and try to do something that's not as common, basically. And rhythmically, this is really trying to... The reason I chose for the name The Ultimatum is because rhythmically what I tried to do here was having this sense of urgency and this sense of kind of tension and distress. And that's the feeling that I think an ultimatum kind of brings. And an ultimatum really fits the theme of the poison. So yeah, that's the idea behind it. And I'm really happy with how this turned out. And then it's the outro again. So lots of sound design, a combination of my own stuff and some presets and orchestral stuff that's being kind of bombed by not doing what a normal orchestra should do. Cool piano harmonies, and my favorite sound of them all, this. I have to say, it went in like, I think it was like 3 AM or something, I don't know exactly, when I did this. And we got to this part and I was listening. I was just like, I was jumping, like, holy shit, that's so cool. And I'm still feeling that, like, that's a core memory when making music for me. So making this piece was very special to me. And yeah, that's it for the ultimatum. That's the breakdown, that's the walkthrough. And I hope, with this in particular, I hope I can inspire you, if you're a creator, which this channel is mostly meant for. Create your own crazy stuff and don't be afraid to kind of go into that direction. Because like I said, this was originally a trailer brief that just de-escalated like crazy. And I still did the trailer brief 2 days later or something. And I did this and it was so much fun and I'm really happy and I have this fun to thank for it. I have no idea how well this track will perform. Maybe it only gets 100 streams and I would still be happy because I had a lot of fun making it and I can always listen back to it and kind of relive that fun. And it's also just a great escape from all the emotional stuff in life, and then just having this is just great. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Wishing you a great night, specifically night. If you're not watching this at night, it's not cool because I wrote this in the night. And that's how you get cool stuff. Like at some point in the night, your brain just starts to just And then if your brain enters that state, you can be the most creative you can ever be. I don't recommend to do this often. It has a lot of downside as well. But every now and then it's pretty fun to get high on sleep deprivation. I have to do an outro. I don't script this. I'm just going to press stop recording